Ivy and Gecko acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and future. Welcome to Hearts and Minds. Our podcast episodes feature conversations with highly accomplished mining executives and board directors. We'll explore critical themes relating to leadership impact, staff engagement and culture development. So tune in, enjoy the conversations and prepare to be inspired. I'm Alana Bray-White, the Managing Director of Ivy and Gecko, and this is our podcast, Hearts and Minds.
What I've learned is stay agile and remember where reverse is. Because my word, nothing beats just throwing it into reverse, taking a few steps back and having another run at it. Interestingly, what I find is that teams are very forgiving. What they like most of all is the leaders who will make a decision and keep them moving forward. But I would contest that farmers are not only fully integrated into the economic and social fabric of society, they are celebrated because they are primary producers. They are much loved and embraced in the deployment of their activities. You can't say the same thing about the mining industry. And that's where we need to head. A community should be able to celebrate the development of a mine in their shire, in their jurisdiction.
Our guest today is Dr. Carmen Letton. Carmen is an accomplished mining executive and board director with over 35 years global mining experience in Australia, the Americas, Asia, Africa and Europe. She is the former Head of Asset Strategy Development at Anglo American and previously held senior roles with BHP, Rio Tinto, Newmont and Newcrest. Her NED portfolio has included board roles with Magnetite Mines, Technology Metals Australia, Canna Gold, Endeavour Mining and Goldfields. Carmen's credentials include a PhD in Mineral Economics and a Bachelor of Mine Engineering with honours. Furthermore, she is also a graduate of the AICD. We've been waiting a while to record this one. I really appreciate the candid nature of the conversation. Carmen opens up about lessons she has learned in building high-performance teams and talks about the need to show humility and the importance of revealing vulnerabilities as a means to building trust. Her empathy and love for her team members is deep and motivating. Her fascinating analysis of the reputational status of the farming and mining industries reveals a very astute and insightful mind. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy this conversation with the one and only Carmen Letton.
Carmen, so nice to have you on this podcast. We've had some wonderful guests, but I'm so pleased you've accepted our invitation. This podcast, as you know, is all about talking with company directors and executives of mining companies with a focus on the mid-tier companies and engaging with them along the themes of leadership effectiveness and engagement of stakeholders and the development of culture in the context of a mining business. And what we hope is that by listening to you share some of your experiences and insights, the listeners and the viewers of this podcast can take bits and pieces away and reflect on them and potentially learn and improve their own effectiveness in their relationships at work. Now, you're a highly accomplished and very well credentialed mining executive and director, so I'm sure you've got some really valuable stuff to share. So, really good to have you here today. What we like to do initially in these podcasts is delve a little bit into the backstory of our guests, their childhood, so that we can gain an understanding of their early influences, what makes them tick, why they decided to come into the mining industry and then go from there. So tell us about your early years.
Well, I am a farmer's daughter. My mum and dad were some of the inaugural adventurers into the opening of farming land in the southwest of Western Australia.
Right.
I come from a small farming community called Jurdacutup. It's right next to Hopeton and Ravensthorpe down on the south coast.
So you're a sand groper?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I was actually born in South Australia.
Okay.
And I moved as a very young child, a toddler, to Western Australia with my mum and dad when they purchased a new land block down in the farming releases of the South Coast. Yeah.
Great. All right. So, and tell us a little bit about, you know, the environment that you grew up in, your schooling. Did you always want to become a mining engineer?
No, I didn't. So I grew up on our farm.
Yep.
I grew up watching my mum and dad clear from virgin bush a farm and helping them to do it from the time I was about 8 or 9 years old. And we didn't have much money, but we were rich with other things, you know.
Yes.
We were semi-subsistence livers, and we were a big part of our local community, a group of other families that were doing much the same things with children, like my mum and dad were. And so we were a big part of the fabric of sport and education and community in our little district.
Yeah.
And I went to the Jodacutup Primary School for the first 7 years of schooling, and there were 28 children in the whole school.
Wow.
And
So do you have one teacher for several grades?
Yes, one teacher for grades kindy through to grade 4, and then one teacher for grades 4 through to grade 7. So grade 4 used to do this transition from the little room to the big room. Right? And we had like 4 or 5 kids in every class group, and we did common classes across many year groups. Yeah. And after I did my primary schooling in Jodacutup, I went to St Hilda's here in Perth in Mosman Park. I was a boarder from the time I was about 12 until I was 17 when I left high school.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and then I went to the University of Western Australia, and I stayed at St George's College. I was one of the first intakes of women into what was previously an all-male college, St George's.
What years did you stay at St George's College?
1983 and 1984. And that's a giveaway, isn't it?
Well,
you're a tricky guy, aren't you?
No. I don't know if we've ever mentioned this before, but we were there at the same time.
Really?
I was at St George's College from 1980 to 1984 inclusive. So we had a 1-year overlap.
Yeah, okay.
I don't remember you there.
I don't know how you could have forgotten.
Oh, crikey. I was quite an introverted person, so you were probably partying and we didn't,
slightly too much.
We didn't catch each other.
That phase of my university studies wasn't hugely successful. I did 3 years of civil mechanical engineering at UWA, and then I left and had a few years of break. Yeah. I did a lot of travelling, and in fact I hitchhiked around Australia and New Zealand. Can you believe that? And then I went back to Western Australia, where I found a weekend to go out to Kalgoorlie, and I joined the School of Mines subsequent to taking up some work in Kalgoorlie.
Yeah,
so I redid my engineering degree from the beginning as a mining engineer at the Western Australian School of Mines.
So a country girl come adventure seeker who knows how to enjoy herself is what I'm reading here. Look, I have to say, looking at your qualifications, you are certainly the most highly educated person we've had on this podcast so far. So you've got an honours degree in mining engineer and a PhD in mineral economics, and you're a graduate of the AICD. That looks and sounds impressive. Do you really enjoy the process of that study and learning, or was it a means to an end for you?
Well, I think the important thing to know about me is I'm always asking what's next. Yeah. And I finished my mining engineering degree and I asked myself what's next, and I decided I would take the challenge or turn my hand to getting my first class mine manager's ticket. So I scooted after that. I then spent some time getting some grounding experience in the technical space. I'd been purely operational till then. And then I thought, now I want to do some international travel and work. And I met some amazing people, especially through Rio Tinto in those days, who I think they sort of led our industry in technical work at that time. And I was challenged by some of those people to do a PhD because I was getting better and better and better at the technical work, and more precisely the overlap of good technical work and solutions with operations and how to deliver on what the technical work was promising. And so I did my PhD by research, which
fabulous
was a good experience. And the AICD option or opportunity just came along via a scholarship. And I thought, my goodness, that's too good to turn down. And I'd like to just have that kind of insight. I was getting more and more senior in the companies I was working for. And to understand the thinking, and potentially for later on as a company director, it was great training and foundations.
The AICD qualification certainly has a lot of kudos, increasingly it seems to me. Do you think it's almost a requirement these days for an aspirant to go on the board to get that graduate qualification?
Yeah, I do think so, and I think it's a little more than that. Graduates and directors are incumbent upon them to continually develop, to keep abreast of things like technology, things like new governance options and procedures. And there's lots of training that the AICD offers as a member to do that.
Let's talk a bit about leadership, Carmen. I think there would be consensus amongst the guests that we've spoken to so far on this podcast that leadership is a set of skills and behaviours. It's an art form, really, that most people can acquire to some degree, as opposed to the old school thinking, perhaps, that you're born a leader or not. What does leadership mean to you? Can you sort of articulate your thoughts on who has leadership responsibility and how those skills can be acquired?
Yes. I'm just going to step back from that for a moment and just say I was not born a leader, but I've got very highfalutin ideas that I am a leader now.
Right.
And I was shaped by people around me. And I think that one of the most influential people was John Gilligan from BHP. He was an absolutely inspirational leader, and he saw in me some weaknesses in my very strong mathematical, engineering, scientific mind that needed to be broken down and some new skills brought in to make me a true leader, true leader of people and of business. And so let me just say, I know that leaders are not born. Some maybe, but not all are born. And I know that leadership skills are a matter of practice, of training, of experimentation and experience.
Yes.
And I think for me, what is the primary foundation under which great leadership is pinned is this aspiration to build, lead and inspire high-performance teams. And I think that then spawns into lots of other aspects of successful business and successful companies. But I think this notion of people and what they bring to the table, their ability to be fulfilled, self-actualised, their ability to be engaged in meaningful work.
Yes.
And their ability to be transformational is really fundamental to great leadership.
Yeah.
And I think that the fundamental piece that a leader brings to the table is this idea that they set direction and that they allow their people to feed off them,
Yes.
and then to add and amplify what they spawn.
Yeah. You've raised some really interesting ideas there, and I think I agree with pretty much all of that in that, you know, people bring to the table a set of skills and experiences and talents and potential, and it really is the job of the leader to identify the capability and the latent potential of an individual and encourage and inspire that person to realise what they've got. It is about engagement. It's about creating an environment, I think, where people feel a sense of belonging and a sense of safety.
Connectedness.
And connectedness, that's right, to really blossom. And I think that's the gift that a leader can bring to the team.
Can I just add as well that I think that the mastery of leadership comes from giving of yourself.
Yeah.
And leading with love and giving of your time.
Yeah.
Because people really feel that.
Yes.
And they really respond well to knowing that they belong, knowing that they can contribute safely, and that some of the things that they contribute might be taken up and some things might not. But those that are not, don't condemn them. And those that are taken up are celebrated by all. I think that that's a really nice piece of that leadership model. Yeah,
I love it. You know, for me, caring for people is why we're here. And you know, if you can, you know, I often say to people that you don't necessarily need to find the very best people, but you do need to find the best in people. So you need to show to people that you have a genuine sense of caring for their well-being, their physical and psychological and professional well-being. And once you've established that connection, they begin to trust you, and then, you know, the relationship deepens and strengthens and loyalty emerges. They will do most anything for you. Okay. Once they know that you genuinely have an interest in their well-being and that you care for them. I think that's so important, and I don't think all managers or executives get that, Carmen.
True. And I don't think that all managers and leaders give of their time and their presence enough to inspire that kind of loyalty and trust. So
maybe too many senior executives are too busy, in the sense that, you know, I think sometimes to myself that people need to slow down a bit, reduce the volume of tasks and activities that they are responsible for, focus on fewer things, work at a pace that comes naturally to you, ideally, rather than a pace that is forced on you by other people, and obsess over the quality of what you do. Emphasise effectiveness over efficiency, I think. And I think that goes with people relationships. You know, it's hard to earn the trust and respect of people if you don't have time to listen to them and to show that you care because you're too busy doing other things.
True.
You know,
it's actually one of the hardest things for people who do take manager and leader positions, because usually they're quite high functioning and they're quite busy by nature, and they get things done, and that's why they're where they are. And to slow down and take stock of other things and make sure that a team is nurtured along in front of them is quite a difficult concept, and it's possibly one of the things that I struggle with from time to time. But I am learning and getting much better, certainly lately, at that sort of thing.
Yeah, don't we all? I mean, life is a continuous learning experience. I'm reminded of a conversation I had a few weeks ago with John Wellborn, who is the Executive Chairman of Phoenix Resources, a smaller iron ore and logistics company, and he's also a former Wallaby, a rugby union player. And he said something that stuck with me. He said, when you look at a list of players, often the leaders don't have a C in brackets after their name. In other words, everyone has a role to play in inspiring their teammates and winning the game together. It's not just a single leader who happens to be appointed chief executive or captain of the team. Everybody's got a role to play.
Everybody's got a role, correct.
Yeah. Does someone need to be charismatic, do you think, to inspire others and build trust?
I like to split this one into two, okay? I want to talk first about building trust.
Yep.
And I think that people and teams are highly intuitive.
Yes.
And you need to present as your authentic self.
Yep.
You need to be ethical and integrous and truthful with them at all times.
Yes.
And this concept of ethics and integrity is not something that is a value that someone tells you. It's got to be a natural thing. And I think the underpinning foundation for this is when you reach the crossroads and you have the option to turn left or right, you ensure that you do the right thing. And sometimes that's really hard. Sometimes people will question whether you're doing the right thing because their value system's different. But I think that the real core to building trust with your team and to building trust within your organisation and to receiving breakthrough outcomes from your teams is them knowing that they can rely upon you to do the right thing, whatever happens. So that answers your question about building trust. Do they need to be charismatic to inspire? Look, I don't think so, not necessarily. I don't know that I'm a hugely inspirational person. I know that I'm excitable. I know that I'm interesting when I'm talking about things that I really love and I really am driven to do well in. But insofar as am I a charismatic person just generally in life, I don't know that that I am, but I do know this. I've had incredible success at inspiring teams to do quite amazing and quite valuable work. And the way that I do this around this concept of charisma and inspiration is that I direction set and I feed their interests, and then I allow them to contribute and allow them to amplify each other. And I think the sum of the parts is what is inspirational for whole teams. And it's when the whole team is inspired that the magic happens.
Yes, that's right. So the synergy occurs, as you say, when the sum of the parts is more than the whole.
The individual pieces.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I remember reading a book, you probably read it as well. Meister was the author, and the book was The Trusted Advisor. And I remember a formula or an equation that he's presented in his book, that trust equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy was the word that he used in relationships with clients, divided by self-interest. So if you look at those four concepts, credibility, reliability, intimacy or empathy might be a more appropriate word perhaps, and self-interest. You know, to me, I often think about that, and in every relationship I have with a candidate or a client in our executive search business, I ask myself the questions: am I presenting as a very credible person here? In the sense, do I know what I'm talking about? Am I reliable in terms of following up and delivering on what I say I'm going to do? Do I care and listen? Do I show that empathy and level of intimacy with the person to build the relationship? And do I put their interests above mine? If I can answer positively to those questions, I feel as though I'm making good progress.
You've got the recipe right. Yeah, I agree.
Tell us about some of the challenges of the different roles that you have, Carmen. What have you learned about yourself, and what have been the leadership takeaways or learnings?
Well, I've enjoyed a really wide variety of roles across lots of commodities, across lots of different areas of work, operations, technical, general management, country management, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And what I've learned about myself is that I can overwhelm and drive people beyond what they ever thought they could do.
Yes.
And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not good. And so my learning from a leadership perspective about that is to draw people to me rather than tow them to me.
Yes.
And that manifests in me asking them to offer up what they're going to do rather than me telling them what they're going to do.
Yeah.
The bigger challenges of roles for me have been all sorts of and I spoke just then about purely a leadership one, but look, I've had many challenges out there from being responsible for recovering assets that are failing financially, failing operationally, failing technically.
Yep.
All the way through to facing down country security issues, all the way through to just working out how to do business transformation and really change the direction of an entire asset development strategy or a business unit development strategy. And what I come back to each time is that one person never does those things alone. It's always the team that does it. So if we fall back to how do you get your team to achieve these quite substantial, how do you get them to beat these quite substantial challenges?
Yep.
It is founded in high performance, in culture, in leadership.
Yeah.
And if you can use those tools that we've spoken about today, then it's possible.
Yeah. What do you think about taking risks and making mistakes? Is that something that you almost encourage as a leader in your people, or do you try, to avoid those things at all costs?
Me personally, I don't like to make mistakes. I really don't. I'm very uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
But what I'll tell you is I've made many. I'm potentially one of the least perfect people that I know. Yeah. And some of the mistakes I've made have been memorable, to say the least.
The key is to learn from them.
The key is to learn. That's correct. The key is to learn, and learn I have. And I do believe that those mistakes have led me to being a better leader. What I do know from some of the mistakes I've made, and they've been mistakes between people, they've been mistakes in the actual technical work that I've been doing, they've been mistakes in strategy, all sorts of things. What I've learned is stay agile and remember where reverse is. Because my word, nothing beats just throwing it into reverse, taking a few steps back and having another run at it. Yeah. And interestingly, what I find is that teams are very forgiving. What they like most of all is leaders who will make a decision and keep them moving forward. Yeah. If the decision's wrong, they'll help you to back up and take a slightly different direction or a completely diametric direction. Yeah. But don't keep barreling them into the wrong direction,
How important is humility and the subordination of your ego in leadership? Because, I look around the business community and I see some certainly less than humble people, they almost present as quite arrogant and all-knowing and domineering, yet, they're successful business people. I see others who are much more humble and willing to expose their vulnerabilities to people. What's your take on, is there a better style or approach?
Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about this last night, and I was thinking about my energy and my enthusiasm and my confidence and courage that I bring to the table, and how that can be quite a driving force. And I was thinking about times where that confidence and courage has let me down, and I can think of a really great example. When I lived and worked in Papua New Guinea, and I had 16 fabulous Papua New Guinean mining engineers that worked for me, and we were sort of building their training from the ground up, teaching them to use new systems, building excellent young professionals out of them. And we were successful. They were successful because they went on to live and work all over the world, that group of young men. I remember a day where I was convinced a major mammoth boo-boo had been made in drill and blast. This is a while ago, okay. Yeah. A major boo had been made, and I was thumping the table and declaring that this is unforgivable and we need to fix this straight away, mistake, mistake, mistake. And they were all standing there with eyes really wide like this, looking at me.
Is this the Indigenous people or
this is
expats?
the Papua New Guinean,
okay.
the Papua New Guinean mining engineers, all standing there looking at me like this. And I finished my spiel with them about what we were going to do to fix it. And I took a step back and turned, and as I went to walk out the door, I realised that I'd made a mistake, that they'd actually done everything correctly, and the error lay somewhere else. And I didn't stop myself quick enough from walking out the door, but I only got one step further and I turned around and walked back in. And I just said, this isn't what happened, is it? And the relief was palpable.
Yeah.
They were all...
Yeah.
And my dear friend Joey Ikadidi, who was heading the drill and blast, was already laughing. As I said, I'm terribly, terribly sorry. Yeah. I get that everything done from this office was right.
Yeah.
And that the courage to say that you were wrong is hard. It's hard to do. That was hard for me to do, and it was right for me to do it.
And you would have grown in stature in the eyes of your people. Because of admitting that. And some people wouldn't have, Carmen. They would have walked out and either communicated it by email or vicariously through someone else that they'd made a poor judgment or misread the situation. So, courage, vulnerability, it's all important.
So having that conversation with them after that about, so how do we fix what happened, was open for them to make a contribution and then go out there and fix it. So I think that humility is fundamental, and you don't have to be humble about things that you are great at and that you are sure about and that you really want to drive to have happen. But you have to be humble with your people and their energy and their contributions and their efforts to deliver what you want.
Yeah, it really is a team game, isn't it? And someone famously said, it's amazing what you can accomplish together when you don't care who gets the credit. You know, recognising everybody's contribution, no matter how small or big it might be, to the achievement of an important objective is so important.
Yeah.
And now we take a short break to acknowledge our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Halo Civil Engineering. Halo is a multidiscipline civil contractor that specialises in the delivery of complex civil projects across defence, infrastructure, energy and resources. A West Australian company committed to delivering dynamic solutions with a focus on zero harm, while having a positive impact on their industry, clients, and the people they serve. For more information, search for Halo Civil Engineering on socials or visit halocivil.com. If you'd like to inquire about sponsoring an episode of Hearts and Minds, please reach out to us on LinkedIn or via email info@ivyandgecko.com.au. Ivy & Gecko is a leading Australian talent and organisational consulting firm. We specialise in providing executive search and board consulting services to ASX small and mid-tier explorers, developers and producers in the gold and critical minerals industries. As the only executive search and leadership consulting firm to be admitted membership of the Minerals Council of Australia, Ivy & Gecko is uniquely resourced to advocate for the interests of our exploration, project development and mining clients.
As a non-executive director, Carmen, you must have been in positions where you have input to the evaluation of a prospective CEO coming into the organisation or a senior executive. So as a board director looking at the ELT, what are the qualities that perhaps the most important personal qualities that you think a senior executive must bring to the table?
Sure, good question. Look, I'd like to start with character. So I like to look for character first, character second and character third, because I firmly believe even at an executive level you can train for skills, but you can't change character too much. So that's my number one.
And when you say character, help us understand what you mean by character.
I mean that they are open to everybody's ideas, that they have great experience and offerings to put on the table, but want to draw others into that. That they have stories to tell that are meaningful and impactful, that they have got underlying health and well-being at their core for themselves and others, and that they are just of good salt, you know? And I like to think that part of the character story is that you can trust them to always do the right thing, that they stay out of the politicking and the power-based plays, and that they will focus on the work and drive the outcomes for the business with the people ahead of them.
Tony Kiernan said to me once that, David, the best ingredient for a net is simply that they are decent people. I'd like to pick up on a point there. You mentioned storytelling, and I so agree. The ability to tell a good story, and I know you can, where you can, in order to reinforce or emphasise an important theme, you build a story, you build a plot, you identify and colour characters in that plot. And you outline themes of the story. If you can communicate in that way to people, they seem to attend to it more.
And connect to it.
They do, don't they? It becomes relatable, and if you can personalise it, so much the better. So if I think back of all the good leaders, effective leaders in my life, they've all been good storytellers who can customise and personalise the issues to a person.
Yeah. I think too, if I just go back to the key mining executive elements that I look for, I also like to look at the business and where it's headed and what we need. And I like to try and find someone who's better than everyone else that we've currently got at particularly that piece, you know?
Yes.
Because I think that that's where you start to get these really unique options on the table, really unique ability to parallel path think, really interesting capability around complex problem solving. And I really like the shuns that go with it, the collaboration, the integration, the communication type words that go with options, parallel path thinking and complex problem solving in leaders so that you end up with this quite unique environment, which is the beautiful home of a high-performance team.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. That's right. I mean, it's context changes everything, doesn't it? And you, in your point there, you say it really depends where the company is at, whereabouts in its journey of development is the company positioned now, where does it need to go, and therefore what are the talents and the skills needed to take the company into the future. So doing that good skills matrix analysis at both the board and the executive levels is so important to try and work out who you need. And I have a saying in the recruitment industry that you long list on evidence of competencies, you shortlist on evidence of relevant achievement, but you hire on values. Ultimately you've got to find somebody that embraces the shared vision and the shared values that collectively will drive the team forward. That's the hard bit of any recruitment exercise.
Correct.
You can't read that off a CV. It's something that intuitively and perhaps to some degree scientifically you need to work out.
Yeah. And getting the chemistry right is also very difficult to draw from a CV or even the experience summary.
Yeah. If we look at smaller or mid-tier mining businesses, Carmen, is there an ideal end state culture for these types of businesses? And if there is, what roles do the board and the executive team need to play to close the gap between the existing culture and where they think the aspirational culture should be?
Okay, let's cover off on the end state culture. I like an end state culture vision that is centred around truth and trust.
Yeah.
I understand and appreciate the long list of values that organisations like to declare, and I understand that investors may or may not need to see those. I'm not quite sure about that, but I think there's only one of them that is fundamental, and that is truth and trust. And for example, I think if you have to tell your employees or your shareholder base that you will act with integrity and ethics at all times, then the battle is lost, right? So I like this concept of one value, and that value is truth and trust. If you have truth and trust, everything else comes to it. Then at the core of this end state vision that I have is this concept of high performance teams. And I'm not talking about high performance like athletes who win everything. I'm talking about the sum of the team is the individual parts of the team is amplified by their union, and the outcome is bigger than the sum of the parts. So if we talk about end state and all of the components that really contribute to a high performance culture, I think that is a really nice end state for a mining business. And what role do the board and the ELT have in that? Well, I think their role is a calm and firm hand that absolutely espouses the concepts that I just spoke about. I think all shoulders to the wheel, united, moving in the same direction is fundamental to it as well. Often quite difficult to achieve.
A lot. It has to do with modelling the right behaviours, doesn't it? The right mindsets and the right attitudes.
Yeah.
Because
a lot to do with creating clarity, focus, and alignment.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that's right. I mean, I often think of NEDs almost in the form of parents. You know, they must set the example and believe in the right values, and hopefully, you know, the people that they are guiding and caring will follow suit. There's a good analogy there. Should a company's financial reward system reflect compliance with the shared corporate values and the culture, do you think? And if you do, how should it go about doing this?
Yes, I do think so. And I'll just restate. I think there should only be the one value.
Yeah.
And I think that how to do it is to ask an employee to present with examples. How did you make this happen? And you know, I've used that practice many, many years over particularly the last decade, where my roles have been much more senior, is that I've looked to other leaders in the company and to employees in the company to tell me what they did to not just live them, but to bring them truly to the business and the work of the organisation.
Interesting. When we look at some of the challenges and opportunities facing the mining industry at the moment, Carmen, I was at a WA Mining Club event just yesterday and was intrigued to listen to Jim Beyer, the MD of Regis Resources, and a very interesting presentation. And at times I really felt for Jim, quite an emotional one, because he was reflecting on what's happened fairly recently with their McPhillamys project in New South Wales. You know, significant setback in the sense that after so much funding and so many years of getting the
development,
permitting approval processes, so it's clear that the approval process has become increasingly complex and tortuous to navigate. Is Australia at risk of losing its competitive status, do you think, as one of the world's best jurisdictions to invest in mining? Or have we already lost that status?
I don't think we've lost it, and I do think we are still the best mining jurisdiction in the world. What I think is there is movement required on all stakeholders' parts to a more central position.
Do we have too many layers of government and approval, do you think?
Without a doubt. However, I'm at a loss as to describe how it should be if it's not like that. What I know is that most of these things are written in blood, and that we have to work with the system we have. And it's incumbent upon all parties sitting at the stakeholder table to be a part of a successful outcome when you take your place at that table. And I think that the thing that muddies the waters too much is who are the right stakeholders is one of them. Who are the what is the right process to follow is another of them. And what can you take to the bank once it's achieved? And Regis are suffering that that loss at the moment with their permits being retracted. I think that there is some relative newness to the processes that we currently use to get permits. I don't think that the processes that we are using are detrimental to the industry. I think they are good. The pencils need to be sharpened and the processes streamlined so that once the work's done and the permits are provided, you can move forward with stealth. I think that that's the part that's at risk from investor bases around the world when looking in at Australia and our ability to get new projects up and running.
The bureaucracy moves very slowly, doesn't it? And I'm sure it spooks quite a lot of people in the industry, and makes them that little bit more cautious about making the investment. And certainly it's a very challenging environment for even for gold companies that are in that project development phase, given the very, high commodity price of gold, it's still really hard to raise money to fund projects in that sector.
Yeah.
We are seeing a lot of consolidation, though, particularly in the gold industry as companies seek to build their value through M&A. What's your take on this trend, and what do you think the gold industry landscape will look like in a few years from now?
Okay, I think that there are many opportunities for M&A and consolidation where almost all parties will be successful and achieve great benefits. I think there are lots of undervalued assets in Australia, and I'm quite excited about the landscape, actually. Maybe what would be really good to talk about in this question is, what does success look like for those M&A opportunities that might arise? I think what success looks like is that these assets actually go into production, they're actually producing metal, they're actually returning dividends, they're actually operating mines and making profits, big profits. The concept of success doesn't just revolve around those financial metrics and those production metrics. Today it revolves around a really interdisciplinary and multidisciplined approach to doing that work. So typically, mining, we have our core disciplines and we make sure that they are integrated and aligned. Well, now we need to think about the disciplines or perhaps the stakeholder bases that are all around that.
Yep.
And for many of them, it might be surprising to know that lots of them are actually calculatable. Lots of them actually have a cost and a benefit. And so the integration of those really broadly across technology and innovation, environment, community, and other stakeholder bases is something that I think partners with that financial success metric that I spoke about.
As a non-technical outsider looking into the industry, Carmen, I do observe that a lot of M&As don't fully realise the potential of the synergy. It seems to me that many board members and many executives focus heavily, as they should, on the hard assets, the mine, the operating mines, the process plants, the infrastructure that goes with two companies coming together. They perhaps pay less attention and perhaps care less about the integration of the systems and the processes and the people and the culture of the two businesses that are coming together. And I think with that, you are losing a lot of potential value. And I'm not sure that a lot of executives get that. I'm wondering if you have a point of view on that.
Yeah, I do. David, I have a point of view on many things, right? Okay, so I think that fundamental to success in today's world is having great governance, having great process, policy, procedure, systems, toolkits to undertake the work at hand. And I think that is a foundation for that end game culture that we spoke about earlier, with a high-performing team sitting at the centre of it. What I like about this pragmatic policy, process, procedure, systems and toolkits approach is that it enables the work in a routine fashion so that it can allow the innovative thought and creativeness of the people to really blossom without having to figure out, how are we going to do this again, and spend all of their time trying to figure out what's the process and how do we now get around all the bureaucracy because we don't have a process.
Yes.
So on. I think there is a lot to be done in that space for mining in particular.
Yeah.
But what I think is the really big lever in the M&A space in this discussion theme is that two companies coming together, invariably they will have very different policy, process, systems, toolkits, etc. And business transformation, if it's at it is at the core of a successful M&A, is to bring those together. And so engaging both groups with a discussion and an anticipation and an inspiration for coming together and moving ahead as one is both enabled by that foundation and magnificent in its manifestation at the end, right?
Yep, interesting. After many decades of being an exporter of raw materials to various parts of the world, some segments of the mining industry are making some progress in value adding through midstream and downstream processing activity. It seems a tortuous journey, though, and a lot of mistakes and failure has occurred in recent years in that area. I'm just wondering, many people would say we should stick to the knitting, focus on discovering and digging stuff up and exporting it for other people, to convert it into finished product, and then we'll buy it back at a premium. I mean, what do you think? Does our domestic economy, do you think it will ever compete as a regional manufacturing hub of green energy products? Do you think there are too many barriers in the way for us to achieve that?
Let me just step back and say I really love this concept of value add post producing something from a mine, a concentrator, a metal or other. I really love that concept. What I know about Australia is that we've lost a lot of our manufacturing foundations. We used to have very strong manufacturing foundations, and we used to have very strong engineering design capability in that space. So there's a lot to be said for re-engaging with that. I think technology is, Australia's technology foundations and hubs are they are comparable around the world. And I think it is technology and innovation that will take us there back to this sort of environment where you can value add. I have a little experience with it, just talking about the iron ore and the magnetite type environment, but also with other businesses like diamonds and gold as well. What I know is that Australia's got to do that because what are all the people going to do when the technology era really hits the mining industry with large tranches of our population employed in it? And it's a nice solution to step it up to a value add entity that is selling our products and at that premium that we currently buy back into the country.
It'd be terrific to get there eventually.
It would be.
What should the industry do better to attract and engage younger people? I see some statistics. The number of geologists and metallurgists and mining engineers coming out of the education system is certainly not growing. It's probably declining. What's the problem? What can we do better to get these people through the education system to become mining professionals?
Yeah, it's a good question. And what we're seeing in the last 5, maybe even 10 years, probably mostly the last 5 years, is that it's now acknowledged and accepted that we need to start early and we need to engage early with children in primary school and high school and even later at university, to join our industry. And there's a bit of that going on, but can I just suggest it's not across the board, and there are many children who go through their entire education without ever brushing up against any mining professionals, which we could solve if every person turned their hand to this.
So if you were Minister for Education, Carmen, what would you be doing next week to begin to improve the situation?
Well, I would have speakers and teachers come from the mining industry into the schools to take, dare I suggest, I think I could teach mathematics, I think I could teach chemistry, and I think I could teach physics really well. Yeah. And I'm going to suggest that there are plenty of professionals in the mining industry that could do that. And whilst I'm doing that, I could very, very easily and very proactively talk about our industry and the wonderful things that have come to my life as a result of being involved in the mining industry. But I think that there's a step further that has to happen beyond education and driving this piece into the up-and-coming participants for the industry. And this is the tough discussion. It's the discussion about reputation. It's the discussion about contribution. It's the discussion about people's reaction. It's our integration into not just the economic fabric of society, but the social fabric of society as well. And I want to give you an example because I'm a farming girl, okay? You have a think about the farming industry. You have a think about the integration not just into the economic but the social fabric that farmers have achieved. They do amazing things with their properties. They produce incredible primary products just the same way that the mining industry does. Some would argue that there's environmental considerations and environmental recovery that's required from farming, and that happens at a very slow pace. But I would contest that farmers are not only fully integrated into the economic and social fabric of society, they are celebrated because they are primary producers. They are much loved and embraced in the deployment of their activity. You can't say the same thing about the mining industry, and that's where we need to head. We need to, a community should be able to celebrate the development of a mine in their shire, in their jurisdiction. And I think that there are lots of communities that are a long way from that for a whole variety of reasons.
That makes so much sense, that comparison between the farming community and the mining community. As I reflect on it, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can go into any audience, any community and say, look, what's your opinion about farmers? And you can do the same about miners. And almost certainly people will speak in glowing terms, very respectfully about farmers, who are very often, of course, multi-generational farmers.
Correct.
But with the mining sector, there are mixed reactions, particularly, I think, from the younger generation who see a lot of reputational damage, particularly in recent years, in terms of heritage and environment impact. So there is a communication problem to some extent, an image problem, isn't there, that the industry needs to address.
Correct. With the correction of that image problem will come the participants.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, you've got to win their hearts and minds. This has been a fascinating conversation. We're not done yet. So, Carmen, do you have, and now it's your turn, I've been asking all of the questions. Do you have a question for me?
I do. I have two, actually.
Oh.
Of course, I have two. What I would like to ask you is one that's very firmly in your space. You review, you recruit, and you place successfully executives across a broad range of applications, disciplines into the mining industry and other industries, and they're all different. There is no doubt they're all different. What I want to ask you is, what is the common thread? Is there a leadership common thread? Is there a technical common thread? What is the common one?
Well, that's a very good question, and not the first time I've been asked that. I'd answer by saying that, first of all, getting a brief from a client as to what they're looking for in an individual and how that individual will contribute towards the development of the business is a really interesting brief to get, and every client has a different need somewhat. Finding somebody with the relevant and appropriate qualifications and experience and technical skill set is the relatively easy bit of what I and my team members have to do. You know, with time and with the research resources available to us and with our networks of contacts, we can fairly rapidly build a long list of candidates for a job. The tricky bit, and I'd like to think this is how we really become of value to our client, is understanding the values and what makes that potential candidate tick, and whether they will align with the values-based culture of our client organisation as best we can understand it. That's the tricky bit. So it really is the behavioural competencies that we need to assess and measure, partly by intuition and experience of doing it for a long period of time, and partly through the aid of some psychometric tools that might,
point to that.
Shed light on the situation. But there is no recruiting people is not error free. Where people are concerned, there is always a risk of a mistake being made. Our job really is to mitigate, to minimise that risk as much as possible, using all of the resources available to us. So the brief answer, I suppose, Carmen, is that finding people with the technical competencies, not too hard. Finding people with the right mindset and behavioural competencies is the challenge, and that's where our skills as organisational psychologists and as HR professionals comes into play, I think.
Cool. I think that's actually your market edge, David, is being able to do that. It's not an easy one.
No.
The second question I have, and I'll just go back to this concept of how do we get people into our industry, really good quality people, really transformational people, actually, because there is a transformation ahead of us for the mining industry. If it's not technology and innovation, then it is community, and if it's not either of those two, it's environment, and green energy type of things. How do the second part of my answer to that question, after talking about the children and the attracting, drawing them to was about our reputation. And I think the mining industry has to be open to hearing this from all sectors. How do we change the perception of mining? How do we change our reputation? And do it fast.
Really good question. It's all about the pitching and the selling of a value proposition to people. And again, I think that's part of the skill set, part of the art form of recruitment, is that you need to understand how to communicate, how to articulate an opportunity to somebody. And very often, of course, these people are not actively looking for new positions, whether they be older or younger people. So we need to approach somebody, do our best to work out what's important to them, what they value, and then look at our client company, the context of it, and the context of the specific opportunity, and extract from that elements of value that we can then pitch to our candidate. Younger people these days, when I say younger, I'm referring to people in their 30s and 40s. As a career recruiter over the last 35 years or so, in recent years, I've never been quizzed and challenged challenged as much in an interview situation with a candidate in terms of them asking for me to provide evidence to support the green credentials of a client I'm representing. So, that puts me in a situation where I need to be prepared. I need to do my homework in collaboration with my client to be ready to answer those sorts of questions. Kids these days, if we can call them that, don't just look for promises and claims and value statements. They look for hard evidence of progress towards making this planet a better place. So that's what I'm seeing in the marketplace in recent years. More scrutiny, more challenging approaches from candidates, and I welcome that. I think it's a really healthy sign. But you really do need to stop and say, okay, this is the type of individual that I'm approaching to sell this opportunity to. I've really got to make sure that they are the right person for this company and this opportunity. So let's make sure as best we can that the promise of the company aligns to the expectation of the candidate. And where it doesn't, even though the candidate may have superb technical skills and fit in so many other ways, if they're not aligned to the culture of the place and where this company is going, then it's probably best to abort the process and look for an alternative candidate. So I think that's how I'd approach that question, Carmen.
Cool.
I'd like to ask some rapid-fire questions, Carmen. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Who is the leader, living or deceased, that you would most like to invite to dinner to learn about their ideas and thinking?
He's deceased. His name is Nelson Mandela. I have the most wonderful connections to South Africa.
Yes.
I had the privilege of working with the fabulous Cheryl Carolus on the board of Goldfields, and I learned much about her early life and her work with Madiba and the challenges that they faced and the successes that they mounted for all peoples. And every time I go to Johannesburg, I go to the square to see his statue and draw some inspiration from his life. So if I could pick one person, I would love to have met.
You and many other people. He is such an exemplar of everything that is great and beautiful about humanity, I think. I've never been to South Africa, but I would love to do that as well and pay homage to, the memory of that man and the way he modelled values. What's the best career or business advice you've been offered, and who gave it to you?
Well, I'm going to go back to a couple of the truly inspirational people that I've worked with. The first one I'm going to talk about is a crazy geologist that I worked with at the first mine that I was ever awarded a job at, and his name was Ian Robertson, and he was enlightened for his time. He had mostly women working with him, and this is in the early 80s, and he inspired me to go back to become a mining engineer, and I've enjoyed an incredible career. I've enjoyed a lifetime of truly fabulous work that I never anticipated as a young woman.
Yeah. And
I really do thank him. I'm grateful for the opportunities he gave me. And the second one I want to mention is another guy, and I mentioned him earlier. His name was John Gilligan, and I worked for John when I worked for BHP on the Olympic Dam expansion project. And he delivered his advice to me as a lesson. And that lesson was well learned, although it near brought me to my knees on the day. He took away every KPI and every goal that I could calculate from me. I'm a mathematician and a scientist. Can you imagine how that stripped my soul of all confidence.
And what did he replace it with?
He replaced it with a no surprises strategy for all of your peers was my KPI. And let me tell you, some people are very easily surprised. So it's tricky. And that brought out much better communication skills in me. He gave me KPIs. I had 3 KPIs. The first was to be well-resourced for the work that we were going to do. And the second was to say what we were going to do and then do what we said we would do. And the third was a no surprises strategy for anyone in the team, any of my peers in the team.
John was a technical professional.
He's a geologist.
Yeah, okay.
And
So out of the box thinking, perhaps.
Yes,
for a geo.
Yes. Out of the box thinking on safety, out of the box thinking on technical work, and incredible vision around direction setting and strategic development of mines and business units. And
you're very well informed. I'd imagine you're an avid reader. Do you have a favourite book that you'd recommend to someone?
I'm probably going to disappoint you. I am an avid reader, but a lot of the reading that I do is sort of quite technical, and I do that reading to bring cutting edge solutions to a lot of the work that my teams and I do. But if I want to talk about my favourite book, and this is a fiction book, I'm a great fan of Bryce Courtenay, and The Power of One is just about my favourite book ever.
I've heard of it but not read it. What's the key message in that book, do you think?
The key message is that the contribution of one can be hugely significant, and to prevail against all odds and headwinds is our calling in life. The second book that I would like to mention, and it was recommended to me by the current CEO of Anglo American, actually, Duncan Wanblad, and it's a book called Legacy. And it talks about high-performance teams, and it's based around the All Blacks and their high-performance culture. And I think it's got some wonderful messages. It's a very easy read, and I'm a lazy reader on the self-improvement front.
I love sporting theme books and biographies and autobiographies of sporting leaders. I find it very inspirational.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a productivity hack, something that you do probably at the start or the early part of each day that helps you get the most out of your day. Okay.
I try to get up and out of bed and do some stretching and some yoga. That helps me as I'm getting older, right?
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is that I make a list.
A to-do list?
A to-do list. I have a list every day.
How many things are on that list, typically?
I try to make sure it's never more than 10. And I never get all 10 done, but I don't mind. Those that I don't get done, I just carry over to the next day. And I don't let any carry on for more than 2 or 3 days, because I'm a bit like that. You know, if I don't want to do something, I'll just let it keep being on the list for a long time.
So on your to-do list, do you prioritise those 10 items or 6 items?
Yes.
Yeah, you do.
Firstly, must-dos, and secondly, like-to-dos. And
Yep. Yeah.
And I think as well, I like to have a think after the list about what does success look like and what am I grateful for. And mostly I think about my family and my husband, who's been a home dad for our 30-odd years together. I'm very grateful for him. He's been the empowering and enabling creature in our relationship, and he's helped me to raise 2 fabulous children who I am also really grateful for. So I think it's a nice reflection, and I try to remember that every day, and I try to send my kids or my husband a note each week or something like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
You are a sensitive thing.
I don't know about that.
I reckon this will be a tricky question to answer. What's the biggest misperception that people have of you?
That I'm angry? No, I'm enthusiastic.
Right.
That I'm powerful? No, I'm just excited and energized by things that I'm interested in. That I'm ambitious and powerful. I'm ambitious, but I'm not powerful. I like to share my power with people that are at least as good as me, and perhaps better.
What activity bores you the most?
Well, I'll tell you, and I have recent experience and I have a whole career of experience with this. The power plays, the politicking, the manipulation, we'll exclude this one and we'll include that one. That stuff, I've never developed the skills for it. I've never developed the energy for it. And it really does bore me beyond tears.
What's the flip side of the coin? What most excites you?
Okay. What most excites me is the work. The work of a mining engineer, the work of a mineral economist, the business of mining and building value for stakeholders in all sorts of dimensions. I love to think about the options and what pathways might be open to us. I like to seek and find highest value. I love to have a complex problem and peel back the layers and solve it and find technical, mathematical, operational or other solutions for how to get through them. And in general, I just really like diversity of applications as well. So I like to be engaged across multiple commodities. I like to be engaged across different mines and different opportunities. They're the sorts of things that really fire me along.
I'd love to work on a board with you. I think you'd be a breath of fresh air in terms of the openness, the diversity of thought, and I think companies would be very lucky to have you on their governance team. Time slipped away. This is probably the longest podcast we've recorded, and that just reflects, I think, the level of interest and information that we've conveyed. Carmen, thank you so much for being a part of Hearts and Minds.
Pleasure.
Jetting over to see us here in Perth, and all the very best with what you've got in store in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's it from me.
Great. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you. That was good.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.